Welcome back. Welcome back. It's 22. Marvellous innings.
222.
Can we wave to the crowd?
Where's YouTube?
If there is a crowd.
Phil needs a Canadian flag.
Yeah.
It's good to have you back.
That's a pretty cool jacket. Couldn't possibly wear it, but it's quite. They're in that vintage.
There you go.
Yeah.
Everything I've
George
got.
Clark can
everything
wear
I've got
that.
is
He'd
retro.
probably fit that.
George wasn't born when that jacket came.
Can't get on Facebook yet due to poor Wi-Fi. But that's
Self-proclaimed best import to Australia since Hillary Henry.
Can you come through that camera though?
I assume we're not on.
No, we are on. We're on,
Right.
we're on
I was going to
Facebook.
make a joke about TVs and robbery, but
We're on Facebook. We're on Facebook.
Didn't make that joke.
Don't do that.
Hello, Facebook.
We're on Facebook yet because Facebook doesn't work.
Should have eaten all these biscuits. I'm probably sitting a little bit close to you. That's about.
No, I've measured it out. Unless you moved.
No, I don't have moved. Yeah.
There was an X on the spot.
Oh, was it really?
No.
Oh.
But I
You got me.
have polished the chair. During
But Disneyland. Did you take your kids to Disneyland Paris 20 years ago?
my
Actual Disneyland.
the real thing.
Wow.
But Euro Disneyland, because everyone forgets it was called that, wasn't it? No.
Yeah, it was Euro Disney, wasn't it? Yeah.
This is what people have missed.
My children need one.
What technology?
Yeah, that and just talking about irrelevant stuff.
I reckon we can always do irrelevant.
Oh yeah.
It's our middle name.
I watched some quick highlights.
Oh, we're on Facebook. We're on Facebook.
Hello, Facebook. How we've missed you.
There we are anyway. Yeah. There you go. Look at that. Live. Oh. It says rotate your device. You can't turn your phone while live. I'm not. It's not rotating. Come on.
Don't fall over the camera. Strategically placed.
If you want proper broadcasting, go on. It's not the BBC, you know. We've not legally produced bank statements. That's topical humor, you see.
Satire.
Yeah. Oh. So we're back.
It's as if we've never been away.
I mean, the first thing we've got to say is Mark and Scully have not been banned. They will be back in the future. They're just not here today. They're just not here. But they will be back. But everyone is going to just over the next however long they're here is just going to ask that question. So I thought I'd say it now.
Are you recording it?
Oh no, I've forgotten. This has had some right bashing over the last few weeks. Because obviously when you go to
You
interviews...
said you're recording, you weren't recording anything else, hopefully.
No, that's true.
That wasn't going to be before we were
No,
there.
not at that time when I put out that bit of the podcast where we said Richard Hager was off the witness, which didn't happen. But that was a classic. We're back. We're back. Boris Johnson,
we haven't missed you.
yeah, Boris Johnson has let us out of the house. Sadly, we haven't got his Uber Eats bill.
No, but we do have social distance biscuits.
What? Do you get that on your other Rugby League TV programmes? On the Super League show, is Tanya bringing in biscuits for you? She's not, is she? No. I mean, you can't have them.
They're not real.
What should we start with? Well, I feel a bit lost because it's been so long. I don't know where we. I don't know what we talk about. I don't know what we do.
We've got the wins all season.
Both against
I
Wakefield.
can only dream.
And
of that.
at least one of them against Wakefield I shouldn't have won. Wakefield were robbed.
Robbed, dodgy referees, isn't it?
You're pandering to the crowd, aren't you?
No, I grabbed.
Do we start with this week's games, or everyone wants us to talk about academies, but I don't know if we want to get into that straight away because it's a bit of a in-depth issue, which takes more than just jumping straight into. There's a little nuance to it. Let's talk about Bobby Fulton.
Good place to
I
start.
mean, we could have, if I'd have practiced this properly, I would have printed off the script. You could have been Harry Gratian, and he could have been Bobby Fulton.
I was there. I witnessed that.
But sadly, I only thought that on the bus on the way in, so I couldn't do that. But
So you saw him berate the journalist because he was
stood next to him.
quite known for berating journalists and being a.
That was at Wakefield.
it was the last time we played the Australians.
And a contentious game. I think at least 2 Aussie players got sent off. A little
unfairly.
bit robust. And Mr. Gratian points to Mr. Fulton that he felt his team had overstayed the mark and got the shortest of shrift in.
Well, he's from Warrington.
I think he basically said, "What do you know, and what are your qualifications for even asking that question?"
Yeah, no, very sad and surprising news yesterday. I don't think many people knew he had cancer. 73 years old, and quite an outpouring. Both from Australia and this. I spoke to Malcolm Rowley actually this afternoon, who obviously played with him back in the 70s and against him, and then coached against him, both internationally as GB coach and the Newcastle Knights, and he was quite emotional. And I think he described him as one of the best three plot team ever. And I think if you look here, I mean, I've wrote down some stats. I don't want to bore people, but what he achieved in player, but then as a coach, as a commentator, he was a radio broadcaster, selector for New South Wales and Australia, and an administrator at Manly most recently.
He was Mr. Manly, wasn't
he? He was.
If you were to try and pick one person,
yes,
who represented that club more than any other,
there'd be two. Well, there'd be two people in that. There's the Ken Arthurson stand and there's the Fulton Menzies stand. Obviously, Steve Menzies. Steve Menzies has scored more tries for Manly than anyone else in the club's history, and he broke the record of Bob Fulton's. And it was Ken Arthurson who brought Bob Fulton to Manly, and Manly had never won a grand final until Bob Fulton came, and he won 3 grand finals as a player.
but he wasn't even an Aussie.
Well, he moved at 4, so
Warrington's finest.
yeah. He had a season at Warrington. I looked it up, and he played 16 games and he scored 16 tries. That's not a bad record. No, I think you could safely say, if you were going to pick a team today of the Rugby League players who've ever played in history, since 1805, he would be in that team, and rightly so.
Yeah. A genuine immortal.
Yes, one of the original immortals, but yeah, a genuine immortal. And as I said, I mean, he won grand finals as a coach. He won them as a player. I think from what I've read, I never saw him play. Being born at the start of the 80s, he retired. But I remember him as a coach at Manly, and the mid-90s, Manly, the 95, 96, 97 grand final. His teams defensively, he had a great eye for talent and a very quick wit. I think the famous line about Bill Harrigan, the referee disagreed. He said, "I hope you get run over by a cement truck." And then I think the next game that Bill Harrigan refereed at Brookvale Oval, someone had actually parked a cement truck in the car parks. Yeah, he was a polarising figure in the game as well, because I think he was quite blunt, fiercely loyal. Yeah, which you saw. But yeah,
Played in 78 Kangaroo Tour over here.
won 3 World Cups.
I remember seeing him play because I am old, clearly. But
35 tests for Australia, 25 tries. I watched some highlights of him. He was obviously a centre who also played at standoff, and he just sort of had everything. He had speed, he had a football range.
he was aggressive.
He was tough. He was, one of the fittest players of that era. Great support player. Could sniff out a try and could kick.
Has Richard gone off for an HIA?
No, well, I was told that YouTube's not working, but it isn't. Whereas Facebook's the wrong way around. So I'm just going to see if I can turn it upside down, because it told us it was not working. You can keep talking.
No, I think it's great that we're back, and clearly we have the same issues we had before.
Yeah.
It's like we've never been away.
It's good to do it on Zoom. It was easier that way.
And then I could talk like this.
Like a dog.
We're still on
It's
Zoom.
the 15 Forexes that you had before every podcast film.
Said the man who was just again hungover yet.
Not for the first time or nor the last. But no, it's for rugby league
Well,
in general, particularly for Manly, and
it is appropriate that we start, paying tribute to someone we've lost, because we've not been on air live.
lost a lot of people.
The game has, not only the great who played, but the good who watched us.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah.
Whilst we're pleased to be back, we know that there are some people who may even be close to us who can't watch. And
Yes.
I think the being in front of the fans, that was really emphasised. I think that's why it was so emotional when teams ran out to warm up. It wasn't just that those who were there were back together and in their spiritual cathedral and felt that whatever normality is was returning. I think we all suddenly, there were some who weren't there. We should not forget that this has been a tragedy.
Yes, definitely. And globally, it's touched everyone. And I think the atmosphere, I think it really spurred the Rhinos on, particularly in the first half.
Although it is interesting how many teams who have
Yes.
had crowds for the first time lost. But
Well, Lee have lost twice, but I don't think they can blame the crowd on that.
Derek,
I'm going to say
It's,
goodbye.
I've not got a moustache. It's not falling off. No comment, Phil.
the other thing it's worth talking about is what we're actually watching at the moment. Because the danger is if you're of an age, that if you start talking about the product and the rule, he's like, get out. It was a classic example of the attritional contest.
It was, yeah.
There was a lot to admire in Hull's goal line defence, which is what Breg Hodgson said he wanted to bring to the team. There were some issues about Leeds' malfunctioning attack. But what can you explain to me, as a youngster, and someone who came
Certainly not.
from where this rule's been invented, what is the 6 again? When is it given, and what is it for?
Are we blaming Australia?
Yeah, because I just think at the moment that it's stifling product.
Yeah, I do agree with you in part. I think it's very hard to kind of explain to an outsider now watching, or someone who's watched the game before, and how and when it is ordered.
And this isn't a blaming the referees, because it's total interpretation. But if it was, and it seems to be almost arbitrary, and sometimes, on the first tackle it's a deliberate ploy by the attacking team to get their defensive line set for the 6. That's defeating the object of trying to get flow and momentum in the game, I would venture to suggest.
I think also taking out the scrums even makes it even worse, because there is literally almost no opportunity now, unless the player's down injured or hurt, for the game to be slowed down. And it does also tie into that fatigue element when it comes to tackling and the concussion issue and high shots. Obviously, we saw Corbin Sims get sent off on Sunday. I think he's
Completely exonerated to that.
Yeah,
Because he hit the shoulder and didn't touch
yeah. I think
But that's happened, to be fair.
it has. Yeah, and I think obviously the concussion issue, you would have seen the Magic weekend the weekend before, is raged massively, and the game's dead, it's dying. I mean, we love a crisis, don't we? Whether it's in Australia or it's in England, the game is dead once a week.
I just know at the moment if the product that we're selling to the outside world is necessarily as good as it can be, because the rules are almost encouraging 5 drives and a kick.
Yeah.
And I think we've lost some creative edge. And with the greatest respect to Wigan, they're top of the league, 7, the best start they've ever had to a Super League season. But by their own admission, they're ugly wins. What does that say about the competition?
I think, at least from the Wigan point of view, obviously Bevan French missed 3 rounds, 4 rounds. Jackson Hastings missed a few. They've had some injuries, so they've not had probably their first 17. But I think the style. Yeah, I think the style question is something where I think, particularly, you see it generally in the international arena as well. But the modern game is about the wrestle and the ruck, and it's an attritional.
Yeah, but I thought we were moving away from that. We've gone through the sort of Michael Maguire. Not that we can blame him solely.
Well, no, it was Melbourne. It was Melbourne before the Melbourne that produced him.
And then rules are designed to reward the attacking teams. But what we seem to have now is the attack is very one-dimensional here. I mean, they still have scrums in the NRL, and there are people creating scrums. Penrith are playing some wonderful rugby league at the moment.
And that's
so you can.
And that's not 5 drives and a kick.
No,
they're playing. Yeah.
But I think what we're playing with an unfair ball steal rule that Richard no doubt will on his arbitrary.
If you can explain the ball still real to me now, I don't understand.
And I think it's encouraging. I don't know. that is a negative aspect of the game. It's encouraging you to be negative. And I think that not having the scrums and having a 6 again, there's too many opportunities to just say possession is everything. All that matters is we need to keep the ball, and there's too much we're trying to force an error.
Yes.
Rather than we're trying to create something.
Which I think that has been at least probably the way the top teams in the NRL and State of Origin and the Kangaroos have played for 9 or 10 years. You know, it becomes a chess match, and that, you know, it is about completions, and it is not making errors and waiting till the opposition cracks. And
but
then
your good friend Mr. Schofield would say, the only stat that matters is that you've scored more points than the opposition, and if you're just concerned with preventing the opposition scoring and then feasting off their mistakes, that A, isn't entertaining, and B, isn't the rugby league that perhaps we were all brought up to appreciate and enjoy the most.
Well, probably, you know, his win rate in big games suggests that may be incorrect. But in all seriousness, I think on Stombo, I mean, I think this season and last season particularly, in the NRL, we saw a lot more open attacking play. We saw less block plays, and I think, yeah, you know, the way Penrith play is
maybe we have to go through it.
I think
to get to the other side.
Yeah, I think the reality is the Super League's probably a couple of years behind that in terms of style. Yeah. But we do get examples, as you mentioned, Hull KR last week, and you know there are certain differences. Of how clubs play.
It is a coaching philosophy.
It is, yeah.
But the thing with Hull KR is, brilliant as they were on Monday at Castleford, and really that was an enjoyable game with two teams who have their philosophy is to move the ball and create. Just great to watch. They're coming back up against Wakefield this weekend, and great teams can back up performances like that.
I mean, you can be great entertainers and finish 10th or 11th every year, or you can play a style that wins you games and wins you trophies. And I think if you're Christian Wolf, you know, out of the systems that he's come out and out of that learnings, you play a tough, grinding defensive game that's big on wrestle, that's big on set completion, and you wear your opposition down, and then you strike, and it works for them. I know, you know, there's some Catalans fans, it's boring, right?
The Alton Helens was by Catalan this weekend, which again, it wasn't the most entertaining of games. Close games have an attraction anyway because they're absorbing in themselves. But there wasn't a lot of free. Last night, the Leeds Hull game, there would have been 3-4 clear-cut attacking chances in the entire game.
It was a defence-dominated game. Yeah.
And if we are going to sell it to its widest possible audience on its
big
broadcast platform, do we need to be looking at the rules? Have we brought something in without fully appreciating that you do have to tweak? The one thing about it, and whatever Rich is doing, we can talk about Mr. Van is not frightened to bring in a rule change.
I believe he likes to call now.
But he'll bring a rule change in the middle of the round if necessary. He's not too worried about.
Which is the wrong approach.
It is, but suddenly it seemed to be responsive to. You know, if he was here at the moment and he was seeing a number of Dower games and people saying it's not as entertaining as it could be or should be or used, he'd change a rule.
Which I think is the wrong approach, personally. In my, you know, just because Wayne Bennett and Phil Gould say do this, or he runs a poll. He likes Wayne and he likes Phil. He likes the News Limited journalists, and he tends to kind of, which I think is the wrong approach. Personally, it's very political. But yeah, he is unafraid to do things, and I think a lot of people like that authoritarian style of leadership. But your point about selling the game, we don't sell the game now, so that's a completely separate issue about marketing motion and access to players.
But the one thing we've always said is we've got the product, we don't market it well enough. I
disagree with that.
I am on age that I just think at the moment our product isn't as good as it could be. We seem to have gone from a grand final that had the most epic finish
But that, so you use that example.
But again,
that was a grinding attritional game.
Well,
yeah.
Finals generally are because the two teams can reach at the World Cup finals.
There were two teams who played very, very similar, looking to shift the ball on tackle one through 8 hands. They played that. So yeah, I think.
I'm just the balance is slightly out of kilter.
Yeah, I can understand that, but I don't necessarily agree on all. Not to be a devil's advocate.
If we all agreed, we wouldn't have a program that isn't on YouTube at the moment.
No, I think we're on YouTube. It's not on Facebook.
Oh, program that's not on Facebook.
Yeah. Well, we are on YouTube.
It's nice that we're back in the manner in which we left. Anyway, chaotic. What would you like us to talk about next, Rich? As you're the driver.
I'm giving up on Facebook and I'm going to bin that off because that's not working. So apologies to Facebook, but Facebook's rubbish anyway. Well, I've got that working there.
He's back.
Yeah, hello.
Back in vision.
No one cares about the quality of the product you're selling, says Michael, which is a good thing, judging by the product of the quality of this product.
Well,
it's about culture.
Yeah.
You're selling culture.
I think I'm not sure if Phil is, but Rich, I think dance is one of those things. I mean, I don't think I've ever really watched more than 4 or 5 seconds. I don't get, it's the pageantry, it's the razzmatazz. I mean, it's obviously not the large-chested women anymore, but there's other things around it. To me, it's not a sport. You might go to the pub and have a few pints to it, but it's huge. It's a product. So I don't necessarily think it's, everything on the field. It's more everything that goes around with it.
Yeah, I
it's the
think
package,
there
which
is
the Hearns do
yes.
unbelievably well.
But I also think we're not seeing acrobatic tries being scored in the corners at the moment because
Tom Johnson's head's been taken off.
Because the game isn't producing enough of those moments for every team. The only word I can think of the way we're playing at the moment is conservative. It's don't make a mistake.
In saying that, I was at the Lee Wigan game the Monday before. That try that Huddersfield scored against Warrington through the hands. That was.
Huddersfield actually are now starting to whatever process is.
It's a good
they
process.
Understand and it's taken a month to get to the point where they're all singing from the Ian Watson hymn sheet, but they are playing a great combination of aggressive and attacking rugby.
And I watched lots of their game against Lee yesterday, just before coming. The last try, much similar, quick ball out to the winger, Jermaine Gilbert kicks through, and I think this sort of symbolises it. It was 4 Huddersfield players, 3 or 4, all chasing. You didn't see a Lee player, and they all didn't know who to pick up. It was Michael Hunt eventually, but that just sort of shows the effort. They were all there, and
the last minute,
the siren had gone. They'd won the game by 30 odd points or whatever. But yeah, there was some really slick ball movement and good process.
Well, that depends if your process manages to encapsulate both sides of the game. If your process is Wigan opposition, then it's not a great spectacle. So bring on more of Ian Watson's philosophy.
Well, I think when he was at Salford played a nice style.
Absolutely.
So
I think we have got coaches like Daryl Powell and Tony Smith and Ian Watson, Richard Agar to a certain extent that want to play a certain way. And I just hope that the rules, as they're currently being asked to be administered, doesn't stifle that way of playing, and we're back into if you can wrestle back the opposition, if you big men up the middle are bigger than the opposition, if you can keep going for longer up the middle than the opposition, if your wingers are big because they're auxiliary props, if you're playing a proper loose forward, if your centres are second rowers, and you're getting that homogenised player playing across the sport, then what you tend to get is a relatively negative game plan. The rules will dictate until we get scrums back, which I think we will once the COVID restrictions are further lessened. That will change the dynamic. But I just think we've got to be careful that we don't change what the game looks like to the extent that we lose why we might have a marketable product.
No, it's a fair point.
They're going to be back for the World Cup, aren't they, Scrums?
Well, the World Cup.
Are you sure? Are you putting your house on We're having a World Cup, Rich.
I think we will.
I hope we do.
My
I hope
gut
we
reaction says get your tickets, because I think the issue is not going to be when fans are in the stadium. I think we'll be at a point then where there are enough. The ticket sales have been good. I can do nothing but compliment the Rugby League World Cup organising committee for the way they've gone about in the most difficult of times, keeping everything together and focused. And again, talking of culture, that Michael was all the things they've done around the tournament to give it real value. And I think the government, who have invested quite heavily, want this country to have that tournament at the end of the year to say, look, we can have the Commonwealth Games in 2022, and we are moving out of that era where sports events need to be protected. The issue will be whether the players from Australia, New Zealand, the Pacific nations who are over in
Greece, Lebanon,
the southern hemisphere will come, or will come and be prepared to be quarantined if they do come. And I think they will. There may be some top liners that pull out, and that may be understandable. Everybody has their own personal decision to make about their family and the time they've been away playing. You know, the New Zealand Warriors haven't been home and won't now be going home for an entire season. Melbourne, I think, are moving back to Queensland this week. So some players may well say, we don't want to play the World Cup on the end of what we've been through for the last year and a half. But I do think it will go ahead.
I hope it does. It'll be a massive shame and a kick in the guts for the English game and the international game. But yeah, my worry is the travel restrictions in Australia. I know I've already spoken to one player who would be playing at the World, and he may still play the World Cup, but he's based in England, and it's kind of, well, if I stay and play the World Cup, I don't get a chance to see my family, and I haven't seen them for 2 years, so I may not see them for another year, and that's a big ask.
And there is a pull of playing in a World Cup, but there are issues that are bigger than sport.
If you haven't seen your family for two, you might have a mother who's 75 and gravely ill, or a grandma, you know what I mean? Like,
and having said that, from what we're seeing in the NRL at the moment, we joke that the fourth choice Australians are still, there are some phenomenal talents being unearthed at a very young age.
I couldn't possibly comment, Phil, I'd be accused of bias.
But I think there might be some players that are earmarked for the women's tournament. They're going to have some familial decisions to make, and I don't think they've got anything other than absolute respect for whatever they decide, and hopefully there'll still be enough to have the draw as it is envisaged. I know that the only country at the moment that can't train for the Wheelchair World Cup is Norway, because they haven't been allowed to go back. Every other country now is picking squads and they're training, and you would hope that we'll have enough of that tournament is still in its integrity to be meaningful and viable, and wait for the opening match at Newcastle with the new Samoan coaching the team as revealed by George Clark on our programme last week.
Sonny Bill Williams and the Johns brothers.
What could go wrong with that dream team?
I don't know. And whoever else. I'm watching on my laptop via my phone, because I've given up on the Wi-Fi in this building. The picture's got better, but I think it's just the local Wi-Fi. The local internet's rubbish. Everyone's all working from home in the leafy suburbs of North Leeds.
Well, the sun's come out, hasn't it? Yeah.
So,
it's lovely out there. Yeah.
But the picture quality on my laptop's up fine. So I've given up on Facebook, but no one uses Facebook anymore, do they? Because it's full of people trying to sell you stuff. And, they're mining your data. And,
some of us never used it.
Well, because I follow some Rugby League personalities on social media, and they're full of conspiracy theories. And if it's not Facebook, it's anti-vaxxers and anti-maskers, and some of them might be out of work soon. So,
Pro Academy. Anti-vaxxers.
Yeah, it'd be a shame, wouldn't it? We'll get on to that in a moment. What else has gone on this weekend? That's in the paper. I bought the paper today, so I'm paying John's wages, so that's good.
That someone is.
Man, you're happy. Well, usually everyone just tweets it out on social media anyway. Nothing's happening. So I don't need to
That's a good endorsement for going out and buying a paper.
So if they're going to sign Lee Gaskell, there you go.
Is that because Huddersfield are going to sign to go over here? I have a question, which we sort of spoke about ahead in there last night, which leads on to the World Cup, but in reverse. Do you think there is a danger that Super League is going to lose the bulk of its star box office players whether their contracts are up or not, because of the situation of the difficulty of travel. So whereas in the past you would have a player who would come and written into his agreement might be if we're knocked out of the cup, or if we have a weekend in June where we perhaps have a fixture where we feel that somebody else can come in and take your place without affecting us. You could go back for a couple of weeks, see your family, take care of any business over there, but just make sure you're back for that big game. None of that is happening at the moment, and hasn't happened for quite a while, and it's not on the horizon.
Yes, yeah.
So do you think that every club that has a major overseas player is likely to lose that player for next year?
I wouldn't say every, because I think, we've seen a few players come over, so we're not mid-season, but early season, regardless, when I thought that was kind of surprising. But I guess if you've got a contract offer and you can't get one in the NRL, then you still need to earn a wage, don't you? Unless you start stacking shelves. So I think there still will, but there's a definite danger that some will, because I use the example. So, if you're from Australia and New Zealand, you come over, part of it obviously is the experience of living in England and playing in certain grounds.
Yep.
Obviously what you're being paid, but it's also
it's travel as well. Isn't it?
Travel, yeah. So Luke Dorman, for example, when he played for Castleford, had a young family. He didn't go back to Australia one off season. He went travelling around Italy for 6 weeks. You can't do that now.
Yeah, or you can get on a plane and go to Dublin for the weekend, where you might have historical ancestry.
Yeah,
up to Scotland.
When you live in Australia, you can't do that on the weekend. You can't go to Croatia or Morocco.
No, you'll go an hour and a half for fish and chips, whereas
can't even get to New Zealand.
An hour and a half on a plane, you're in somewhere like Amsterdam. So
exactly.
One of the attraction
that's a huge attraction. I wouldn't undersell that, particularly for players who've maybe played in the NRL for 10 years and are looking for something different. So also when you consider, and obviously we don't know what's going to happen in the future, but there's been almost a year of constant lockdown, while in Australia and New Zealand there's been about a week of lockdown, and they've been at pubs without masks and.
But what they have had is very sealed borders.
They have.
And restrictions.
But if you're inside
that,
you're fine. So
and I would think that some of the players that are over here will get an NRL contract, but they certainly would get an equivalent contract to what they're getting over here to maybe play in the New South Wales or the Queensland.
You look at David Mead. Yeah. He's been playing for the Broncos. Obviously, Albert Kelly did quite well. Has apparently been doing quite well in the Q Cup, and then they moved to the Broncos and had an outstanding game. I think there's certainly.
I mean, I don't think it's any coincidence that Huddersfield are being linked with halfbacks, because I think they know, and I'm only using him as an example. And you do news and I don't. I can't see Aidan Caesar being here next year.
I think that's
on the basis
the
of the fact
impression.
That when he left, he was playing in a grand final side. So if he goes back and halfbacks being premium, he will find a club. And I just think anybody who would pick up a club or is at the end of coming to the end of their career and maybe wants a couple of seasons playing in the New South Wales Cup or the Queensland Cup, I can't see them staying here. That's going to leave a void in Super League because they are box office players. And it sort of leads on to the academy a little bit, that are enough quality youngsters coming through that can take the place of those players and keep the interest and the standard as high as it would be. I'm not saying that's why the RFL have made their decision on academies, but the two are linked. I think we're going to lose more players than we'll bring in.
No, it's a definite danger, and that's out of all of our hands with COVID and travel restrictions. I think also playing into that is there's a watering down of talent because we have 3 tiers. There's players in the Championship who should be playing in Super League. They're good enough to be in Super League, but they're playing in the Championship because they can get paid 20 grand and then work part time and make more than if they were in Super League, which is just a terrible business model. It's smart from them, but it means we don't have the best 300 rugby league players in the UK playing in Super League. We have maybe the best 200, and then 80 of those may play in Championship, maybe 20 playing in League One. So I think, and that is tied to the new TV deal as well, because there's going to be, obviously the distribution to all the clubs hasn't been decided yet, but there needs to be a pyramid as opposed to perhaps a block where we do have the very, very best at the top tier, which I don't think we have now. like in the NRL, like in the NFL, like in the Premier League. You know, we really do. I mean, obviously, there are good players in Championship football that can play in the Premier League, but it attracts all the best players from overseas as well. So, yeah, that's a worry. I think recruitment is really key at the moment. Obviously, there's a lot going on, but as you said, the clubs that are already producing good players, and you know, the best academies in St Helens, Leeds, Wigan, you know, those players are going to be very vital.
I'm hoping when Stu's adventures talking about the shocking camera coverage, he's talking about the TV and not this. One can only hope, anyway. Would you like to talk about academies rather than, because I've forgotten how much the letters page in League Express annoys me. Because I know we've got young people watching the programme, so I can't actually read. It's like the Guardian now. All they've put in the paper, they put like a swear word in the paper, comparing saying a pommy fatherless child is compared to what was what Tony Clubb said to Andre Cervello. It's the same thing.
I'm saying nothing. We discussed this on Zoom and.
So the RFL.
I don't know what our stance is on race.
Let me just like Steve-O used to do. This is me playing devil's advocate. This is me playing the role of everyone on social media. I'm Steve-O now, talking to the camera, which is shocking.
You were Jenna Brooks on Saturday.
I was, which is even more. Sorry, Jenna.
Disturbing for her. For
Kevin
sure.
says we need to invest in better cameras and audio. Yeah, we've got no money though. So.
We've had our distribution cut by Super,
Right.
by Sky.
If I get a laptop so I can work.
35% of nothing.
What was I going to say? Yes. The RFL. I'm talking to you because you are ruining the dreams of everyone who wants to be a professional rugby league player. Because everyone who wants to be a professional rugby league player should be able to be a professional rugby league player and play for the club they want to. I should be able to go back in time to the mid-90s and be able to be in the Wakefield Trinity system because they're the team I support, and even though I was a crap rugby league player, be a professional rugby league player because that's my dream, because that's the kind of nonsense I've read on social media this weekend.
You can't say nonsense because you were playing devil's advocate.
No, yeah, it wasn't I?
That would explain some of Wakefield's results.
That's the kind
Team of sure
that
rights.
is the kind of thing I've read on social media this weekend. These decisions are going to ruin the dreams of people. But in reality, not everyone gets to win the pony. Not everyone can become a professional sports person, and not everyone in an academy system will go on to become a professional sports person. And we've seen plenty of examples of these of people who come up through community clubs, amateur clubs as were, and become professionals much later in their career. It happens all the time up in country, doesn't it? We see players turn pro. It's not the end of your potential sporting life.
Alex Swansea.
He's the obvious example. If we're going to keep going back in time and saying, well, Club X produced X, Y, Z NRL players, well, if we're choosing parts of history, do we have to say, well, Club X also not done this going forward? We can't pick and choose what parts of history we choose to discuss. All these people on social media don't know, as we don't know, what was in every bid, which was discussed by the independent panel. They're an independent panel, and yet we sit here and go, well, Ralph must have said, no, it has to be that one, and it has to be that one.
Yeah, I think we need an independent panel. I don't
know why everyone's upset about it.
The problem is that I don't think we can talk about individual clubs because A, we don't know what the criteria were, and B, we don't know how those individual clubs measure up to that criteria. What I think you can extrapolate from this there are three issues behind it. One is clearly there is not as much money in the sport as there was, and that is going to have an economic ramification throughout the game. At every level, and this is a manifestation of it. I think the second thing is there are not enough players playing the game at the moment, and you can only have cream rising to the top if you've got a lot of milk being fed in at the bottom, and it's not drying up, but it's not at the same level as it used to be. So you have to do something to ensure that those who are coming out right at the top level have a better than average chance of playing at Super League. So you need to define what you mean by the word elite. I think the third thing is that the message has to be clearer, that is coming out about this, because as far as I can tell from the quotes that are in the papers today, from what was briefings that were given by the RFL, nobody is being told that they cannot have an academy. They're being told at what level they can have an academy. So 10 teams can now have an elite academy. Every other club can have a development academy that is linked to a college or a high school academy. That there is nobody who is playing the game that is going to be distanced from playing the game. What level you play at will be determined. And I'm not sure that's necessarily a bad thing, which is not to say the clubs who are in should be in and the clubs who are out should be out. I think that is a totally separate argument. The issue seems to me that we need a roadmap for the sport. We've said it throughout the last 14, 15 months when we haven't been together.
No, we've been saying it for years.
And a roadmap might well be emerging from this academy restructuring. That if there is less money, where do you put it for maximum value? And geography was another thing that they mentioned. And if you've got 2 or 3 teams that are in exactly the same area that are competing for a much more limited resource, upon what criteria do you make the decision that one gets it and one doesn't? So I don't think there's any merit in saying, oh well, you know, John Bateman came from Bradford, therefore Bradford should have an elite. I think the RFL need to answer how they've come up with their decision, but I can see the logic and the rationale, and it's almost like they've got their arm up their back anyway, because they don't know how much money they're getting from this new TV deal.
Well, wasn't it with the academy process, Sport England were involved in it, and obviously the funding from Sport England is tied to participation levels, and they've gone down. I mean, they've gone down basically in every sport, but it's already a small base in rugby league, and I think the messaging is a massive thing. I mean, we don't hear from the top brass of the RFL. They rarely ever do interviews. There isn't. If there is a roadmap for the future, we don't know what it is. And I think when you get the chance to ask questions, there's not a lot of realism out there. And I think
it is what they think people want to hear more than what is actually. It's looking for a soundbite rather than getting into the detail of what the argument and rationale is.
It's the same with the TV deal, Phil. I think you were on the same media call that I was, and
written about it. This very.
Apparently, it's a fantastic deal. You know,
but we don't actually know what it is.
But there's 14 million. You know,
we've had to take a haircut, but it's a very nice haircut.
Yeah. So there's only so much lipstick you can put on a pig. At some point, you know, obviously you can't be too blunt, but you kind of have to, you know.
Well, it's back to Mr. Volandis that whether he is a divisive figure or not, you're in never any doubt as to what his message is, and he's been particularly vocal about the issue of concussion, which clearly is going to affect all contact sport, and he's basically said,
well, it is already.
I wouldn't be doing my duty if, you know, the parents at home of young kids thought that they were asking their offspring to go into a dangerous sport. So I'm going to do something about it at the top level, and then when you watch it, you'll think it's you know, whether you agree with that or not, that is a pretty logical, determined rationale that's been clearly put out there.
Well, rugby union's already done it. The NFL's already done it. Football are kind of getting into it now, and you know, the heading of the ball. You know what I mean? So we can't just put our heads in the sand and say, oh, no, it doesn't exist. Oh, there's all these players who are suing the RFL about it. Oh, we just look away. It's happening.
And that's the thing with the academies. It may well be that because of the economic state, particularly that the sport is in, that there are going to be some very hard decisions made that is not going to be accepted by everyone. But you still have to have a manner of delivering those decisions so that everyone feels that they can understand why it's been made.
Which is why the messaging needs to be better, the communication needs to be better. There's never been accountability and transparency, at least in my time in covering the game here. And I think, you know, that's been the case for...
And I do happen to think, right or wrong, and if there have been casualties in the more developed areas of the game, that we do have to have the limited amount that we've got to put into development in London, because there are going to be proportionately more young kids who could come through that system in the south being given an opportunity to play at an elite level and have something to aspire to, then perhaps there will be in an area where participation numbers are traditionally going down. I think it's the same with Newcastle. You know, if you're going to have a concerted plan whereby the Thunder have been elevated to the Championship, you're going to start your World Cup in Newcastle, you want to have your Magic Weekend in Newcastle, why wouldn't you identify the North East as an elite area? And that is something that as a sport we should be saying, actually, even if we're being slightly disadvantaged because we're not being given the same resource, the sport needs us to go there. And again, I'm not sure that message has got over.
Just imagine in 2024, I think it is when you can reapply, that Coventry are building all these mini clubs in their area. Sheffield have just appointed a development officer in South Yorkshire. Imagine if there's a South Yorkshire Academy and a Midlands Academy.
But
they come along.
There was a Midlands Academy.
Yeah, and they closed it.
Yeah,
There was
because
the
again,
Sheffield Academy.
because resource is incredibly tight.
That's Craig points out. I'll go to Tony's point first. He says Warrington, Wigan and Saints have been granted elite academies, 3 clubs in a 10-mile radius. Is it really about the geography? Come on, guys, that's nonsense. We don't know. We don't know what.
Well, it says in the press release that geography is one of the factors.
One of. So there's obviously another reason why they've got one and
But I think
another club in that area
the best academies or the best recruiters don't just. I mean, Morgan Smithies is from Halifax, and he came through the Wigan.
Reading races from Wales.
Look at half of the Penrith team. They're from Dubbo. They're from Parks. They're not from Penrith. There are a lot of kids from Penrith, but that's generally you recruit it. Well, sometimes these days they recruit at 12 and 13, but you recruit at young ages. It's the system. It's not necessarily the kid who lives two doors down. Yes, you want to cater him as well, but you want the best talent, not just because he lives in that 10-mile radius.
How many times has Mark said on this programme that the sport will probably be as better giving money not to some professional clubs, but to the likes of Rochdale, Mayfield or Siddle, who produce professional after professional.
He's 100% right. I mean, we don't. The whole grassroots community game, I think, is being ignored.
This is again the great Lord Schofield rang today to tell me how much.
By the way, we are going to get some like posters printed up. Scully for president. Going to put Donald Trump's hair on him and stuff.
Well, he rang to say how much he'd enjoyed the Leeds Hull game last night,
and
particularly the creativity.
Jake Connery.
On the last tackle.
Big fan of Jake Connery, must be.
He's a bit down on the game at the moment, but he was. We were talking about his desperate desire to be the chairman of Barla, because he thinks that there are certain things not being done at the moment that were done in my day that did him no harm. And in some respects, the conversation became, but who is going to make this decision? You know, we've got academies being decided by that group, which includes some Super League, some RFL. We've got clubs being decided by that group. We've got the amateur game and the community game by that group. In fact, we've got 2 people deciding on the community game because the RFL runs some of it and Bar. Now, do we not need to have a concerted overall approach that includes everything and everybody? And the bit that's missing is the independent commission that sits at the top of it.
And on that, Phil, you mentioned about a lack of funding or a decrease in funding. Wouldn't that be something that, I don't know, private investment? Might, shouldn't we be looking for outside investment, whether it be a private investor, whether it be the NRL? Do you know what I mean? I think.
But that private investor, I'm told from somebody who is trying to put a plan through at the moment, that what is putting them off is not the amount of money. That money is there, and we are still a relatively cheap long-term investment.
For sure. It's
the governance structure. They won't buy into something that they won't have a say in.
Well, you wouldn't, would you?
So the issue is more about what is the model for the game as a whole, of which academies are an integral but only a part. How does that relate to where we're going to go over the next 5 years?
I'm tending to agree with Craig's point here. He says there are plenty of young players out there not given a chance to play with no reserves. Clubs can't afford to have a reserve team, but can afford to get a third-rate Aussie from down under. It's true, and everyone knows it's true.
I think that is tied into the promotion and relegation argument.
There's another key element of
you can bring in, a halfback who's had 100 NRL games, and you need to stay up. or are you going to play a
Would
19-year-old
Hull
halfback in your
KR
system?
have played Mikey Lewis as often as they did last year if they'd been relegation?
No.
Because this year, when it's back, and it might be that he hasn't trained at the same level, I don't know. So now he has to go out to York to prove himself again to Hull KR. Now,
Would they have signed Adam Quinlan when they did if there was a 19-year-old local? No, because they know Adam Quinlan is a good Super League player. He's proved it at St Helens and elsewhere.
I also think that there is an issue about what is elite, and if you've got a finite amount of money in your competition, it can really only go to the. I think the figure is 1 in 400 of the kids playing rugby league at the moment in a scholarship or an academy system will end up playing in Super League, which is compared to other sports apparently not a bad ratio. But there's a hell of a lot of investment there that you've got to put in over a long period of time to get better numbers. We haven't got that time or money at the moment.
Not every young player will make it, and that's just the truth that's been there from day one.
But then you need to define make it. I think anybody who pulls on a boot and plays in a semi-professional environment has made it. But it's a debate that I think a lot of people have waded into because they've seen a headline, there are no academies at certain places, and actually the thinking behind why they're doing what they're doing and the manner of the people who've been involved in deciding what they're doing, in that Dean Andrew, I don't think anybody could question his A, integrity, and B, independence. You know, he's been a past president of the RFL. He's done wonders with the game in the armed forces. He doesn't have a horse to ride in a race. And Sport England. So whoever else has been on that panel, those two people are as near as we're going to get to independent.
But as ever, it's like if a player makes a mistake on the field, we'll still blame the referee. In this situation, instead of clubs getting their own house in order, we'll blame the RFL. We'll come out and release a statement. We'll come out and have our people who work for our academies or put bids together come out on Twitter and say this, that and the other, despite not knowing the full reasons why. Should they have got those reasons quicker? Yes, but they haven't. So why not wait until you find out why?
I think the most ironic thing I saw over the weekend was that the London Bradford game and the Bradford away fans singing the RFL are corrupt, when Bradford are owned by a former head of the RFL, and there's obviously question marks about the RFL's dealings with Bradford over it. You know what I mean? Yeah.
Which again, I mean, changed slightly, and
I think
been more than happy to get the reaction of people who are.
I don't think there's anything else we can say about the academies because we don't know.
We need a concerted overall approach to where the game is going, and the academies are a part that are highlighting all of the issues that are in the game at the moment, and those issues predominantly are we're geographically restricted, which means we're not growing, so we're not going to get external investment. Our participation numbers are falling, and that, you know, that is the RFL have said that, so that's not criticism we're levying at them, and there is not enough money to go round and do everything we want to do. We don't have development officers anymore, which Sport England funded. This is Sport England sitting on a panel saying if you still want to have our money, this is what you need to do to put your own house in order. That there will be further debate when the details come out about charging people who are involved in the community game a levy to the governing body to be part of it, which happens in virtually every other sport. That is being stipulated by Sport England. That you want your money from central government, it's attached to certain conditions. One of the conditions is people have got to be buying into being part of the sport. If you want us to give you £25 million, you've got to show that you can raise £10 million. And if that's the way of the world, we have to react to that.
Michael was asking if there's a list of numbers who've come through each club. I think there is, isn't
Yes, one of the criteria is the number of players that have come through every academy and made it to first team level, going back, I think, to 2014. And the only thing we do know, because they've admitted it themselves, is that Castleford were bottom of that list. And that was one of the reasons why their bid wasn't deemed to be in that geographical region as good as the other club.
Why Bradford going back home? Because it was too expensive when they played there last time.
There's an
Well, it was
unanswered...
For the last ever
last
game,
ever
yeah.
game.
Yeah.
The last...
Well, they sold off all the programmes, and now they've if you've got one of those, they've fallen in value. Now don't take them to Dickinson's Real Deal. You're screwed.
There is a question here that does need to be asked, and again at this stage it's only a question because I don't know who would give the answer. But clearly, when Bradford moved away from Odsal, one of the reasons they went was because the lease owned by the RFL was deemed to be too restrictive, which we believe was in the realm of about £72,000 a year to play at Odsal. And because there were terms and conditions attached to the lease about repairing the venue, they moved to Dewsbury. They have now signed a new 18-month lease with the RFL to move back starting this weekend. But we don't know under what terms. Are the RFL losing money now because the deal is Bradford are going back to Odsal? Again, if you are looking at the sport in the whole, and you're looking at the resource that the RFL have got, what is happening? Do the details of that deal not need to be made public? I would venture that they probably do.
I would venture that they won't be.
No. But I think when you talk about transparency...
Well, that's the not to be cynical, Phil. It seems like we just go, not just you two as well, but myself, the same issues just get repeated. And if anything, things get worse, they don't get better. It's very easy to become disillusioned because that's the way things seem to go. And, you know, it's like Andrew Chalmers popping up last week, and you read puff pieces about why he would be great to run a club in Wellington, his excellent business record. I mean, you want to punch yourself in the face.
Yeah, that's a hard sell to a national newspaper, isn't it?
Well, I mean, that was...
Man who has wrecked New Zealand Rugby League and taken Bradford to the edge of extinction.
And Maori Forestry.
Is the right man to have millions of pounds to develop a new franchise.
That puff piece was on NRL.com.
Yeah.
Do you know what I mean? I mean, we need certain standards across the sport and in the media as well as everywhere else. And until we get them enforced,
he's off
yeah.
again.
Yeah, the camera's just gone funny, isn't it?
It's just it boggles the mind at times. But I think if we can see a positive out of the reaction to the academy decision, obviously it's been a massive. Maybe the RFL are now aware of the sentiment that is out there. And maybe now other people are aware of actually the position the sport is really in.
But I think also,
away from the spin that's being put out by
the other
people.
thing is, it's also going to force some people to address their own shortcomings.
Yes, yeah.
So if a team has not been given a licence, and if it wants to challenge why it hasn't, it's going to have to prove why it feels it has met those criteria. So I don't think we should be frightened by standards. And it may well be that there is a flaw in the standards and they do need to be exposed, but it could well be that standards are what is missing from the game, and by bringing those in at every level, the game as a whole will improve. So I don't think necessarily if there are criteria. For me, we should know what the criteria are, and every club should be able to say, I appeal on the basis that I think we have passed the criteria. But I don't think the principle behind what's happening is necessarily a bad thing.
No, not at all. But I think when you come to standards, it seems right across the board, pretty much everywhere. Not just in this instance, but so many examples that I couldn't even name, and we just don't seem to have standards that we keep. Yeah.
What's he doing now?
Just keep talking.
Keep talking. That's the easy bit.
Oh no, I'm just going to have to do off the laptop because it's not.
So Phil, who's going to the new coach at Leeds going to be?
Well, the question would be, ignoring that, who is out? Well, there's two things. One is no club can afford at the moment for paying anybody off. So whether it's Leeds or any club you want to mention, if a coach is going to leave, that coach will have to make that decision. I don't think financially a club can afford to terminate a coach's employment before their contract is finished. But the other thing then would be, who would be your candidate of choice? Who is out there who is available for any club at the moment as a potential coach. You know, Lee Radford has been picked up by Castleford, who was clearly on the market. Who else is there?
Brian McDermott.
Pretty sure he won't be going back to Leeds.
Anthony Seibold, your favourite coach.
But you wouldn't, again, be spending money to bring somebody in from abroad at the moment. That is an expense that clubs do not have.
No, that's a good point. No, I think with Leeds, there are a number of issues there.
There's some real mitigating circumstances with Richard Agar anyway.
Yeah, I mean, they've had a horrible injury run. They've still not got their first choice spine, but I think also some of the recruitment decisions over a period of time have not been great, and probably the Wembley run masks some.
Again, I'm not sure you can levy that solely at Richard.
No, not at all.
If at all. No. And I do think
he's a decent job. Done a decent job.
Tetivano is a really good signing. So for everyone and every club gets signings wrong. There are some that clearly are. Matt Pryor's been an absolutely excellent signing. I think Cruz Leeming's been a good signing. So
Tualola here. Rob Louis.
Just that, Louis was very important in keeping them in Super League, and won a Challenge Cup with them. But I think Lola here was just the wrong person in the wrong club at the wrong time. Merrin was really important again in getting them to back on a track, and they wouldn't have got Pryor if they hadn't got Merrin. So
it's a lot of churn in a short period of time. Yeah. I think managing that transition. Yeah. From the golden era, which is not easy for any club.
Hey, Robert Elston. He's looking for a job, old Robert.
Oh, sorry,
He's arrived with the coffee.
No leaks, thanks.
It's Robert Elston.
So I've swapped. We've got a new thing now. I've actually got my laptop on.
Not sure if that's yours,
but it might work. Hello again, viewers.
Thank you, Robert.
We are further apart than we look. I know we'll fly up there. It doesn't matter. You're going to go back to everything? They're rubbish. So, Leeds are in crisis again now. So that's...
Well, there was quite a few... Well, quite a few. There was a handful of fans leaving with about 7 minutes to go. They missed a Briscoe try.
Big fight.
And there was at least one Agar out I saw on Instagram. I'm not sure if that was more tongue-in-cheek. It probably was.
I think we need to be realistic at every club at the moment about what coaches are working with. Chris Chester will be another classic example. When Joe Westerman comes out and says, we want to play for him, nobody's working harder.
Bound Joe Westerman.
Yeah. The conditions that coaches are working under at the moment, the fact that they barely had their players at the beginning of pre-season, they could only train in little groups. Leeds were one of the clubs like Wigan were that had to have a shutdown for a couple of weeks. All of that, the whole Kyle Eastman thing that they desperately they needed a half-back.
Sorry, I forgot about recruitment. I mean, that was a bad decision from day one.
Was it a bad decision, or was it just unfortunate?
No, it was a bad decision.
It was a gamble worth taking.
If you look, they gave him 2 years. If you're going to gamble, you give him 1 year. And B, if you look at
that him making a commitment?
Making a commitment. He was a free agent. No one else wanted him. He'd barely played in the last 18 to 2 years in rugby union, let alone coming back to rugby league after a long period. With his injury record and his age, any recruitment person will tell you, with half a brain, will tell you it was a bad signing. But in saying that, you are right. There was not a lot of halfbacks or players. Yeah. So that,
and if it had worked, it was a relatively low investment.
I don't think it was ever going to work, though, Phil. That is my point. I mean, we saw with Sonny Bill Williams coming back. We saw with Luther Burrell, and we've just talked about at the start of the show how hard with the rule changes.
No, it is. It's not the sport that he's coming back to.
It's not Jonathan Davies in the early '90s. Do you know what I mean? It's just, and most recently, his name escapes me, even though I wrote about it. The All Black who was going to go to the Roosters.
Yes, scrum half.
Yes, unbelievable player. And his cousin is Henry Perinara, his cousin is Sonny Bill Williams. His father played for the Junior Kiwis. He loves rugby league. He's decided, probably not. And he's someone who could make it, but the demands are so much different.
But Trent Robinson wanted him.
Yes, yeah.
And would have taken him.
He would have only, and I don't think money was the primary motivation.
No.
But I think he was going to be on 150 grand, and he's been playing in Japan for probably close to $1 million.
But I also
if he fails,
but I also think that applies to Eastman, that he wasn't on top dollar. He was on a contract that, had he become what they hoped he would be, he may have been on top dollar. I don't think there was anybody else out there at a time where they needed a halfback, so it's a risk worth taking. But again, when you're the coach and the player you're hoping will fill a void isn't able to do that, is it the coach's fault?
I'm not blaming Richard Agar for that decision, no. And I think there's been a lot of decisions made at Leeds for a period of time, and you can go back to the David Ferner debacle.
That is, again, something that I don't think they realised at the time was going to hurt them as much as it ultimately did. So,
Who appointed David Ferner?
There you go.
Phil Kaplan.
Took him out for lunch, said, "This is the club for you."
Funnily enough, though, he was most recently the defensive coach at the Newcastle Knights. Since he's left, the defence has got really bad, so who knows? Yeah, they're a rabble now.
There are some people who just thrive in certain environments, and not in others.
Some people online said he was under pressure. That's what he was told in that press conference, Some people online. Don't know who they were. If you know who they are, let us know.
You ever find it?
Broken the fence. Broken the fence.
I mowed that.
This is the new
that, especially for coming back.
You think you would think Hodgson would cost more to rent now? It's been done up, and its level of iconicness has gone up.
I mean, I don't know. I know you infamously slagged off Speedway many years ago.
I did, which is ironic because we're going to have a Speedway guest on in a few weeks.
How can you have Speedway? I mean, presuming that involves tar roads.
Well, it's shale or something. I don't know anything about Speedway roads.
Would that kind of
just it's on Euros?
Get close to a pitch? Would you need a smaller pitch or something?
You've got to take the corners up, I think, to make it an oval.
So what happens if someone else in the corner and ends up in the face of
you roll them back down again? But that's what used to happen. Also, you'd always kick to the corner because the ball would roll back down.
Sounds a bit faster.
Sheffield United, when they played at the Overton, they had the same issue, didn't they? But the pitch was a lot smaller because the infield at the Overton.
Well, I think players were changing in the car park. Yeah,
it's like the Women's Super League. We'll talk about that in a bit because we've got the semi-finals to talk about.
We were there.
Leeds and Hull. That was done. All those people. Did Leeds Council not let you wear masks in the stand? Because everyone's upset because none of the Leeds fans wearing masks. Well, that's not your fault. You're not Leeds Council.
I didn't realise that I was responsible for that as well.
People got upset about that.
It's my fault for the recruitment, and everybody should wear masks.
I love how you had 2008 people there. Everyone else had the even numbers as if they were rugby union, but 2008 saw Lee lose 44-6 to Huddersfield. But despite that, Lee were the better team. They're not as good as Huddersfield, not as good as Lee.
The thing that's interesting with Lee, they seem to start every game well. They seem to score first every game. But yeah, I mean, talk about coaches being under pressure. I mean, was John Duffy the right?
But should he be under pressure?
Well, he's never coached in Super League before. His team was thrown together.
Yeah, I mean, it's mission impossible.
They've got a massive 2 weeks now, Lee, because haven't they got Hull KR and then Wakefield?
I've no idea.
I think I'm not sure, but I think if they can get a win against either of those teams, it does give them a massive chance. But
they've got Hull KR.
But I think they've got Wakefield a week after.
If they lose both of those games, I mean, obviously there's only a 2-point buffer with Wakefield. I think that's the only but that's a huge result. And I think I've seen Wakefield a few times this season. I don't think that. Well, they shouldn't have lost to Leeds. They've not been that badly in the whole Hull FC game, where they had a player concussed, and Faramo somehow wasn't sent from the field. I mean, yeah.
I think the other thing about Wakefield is that clearly Jacob Miller played yesterday and made a huge difference. If your best players are out on the park in your key positions, the guy who you've given the 4-year contract to, who you want to build the team around, if he's out there, it's massive.
I'll also make a point, Phil. It also helps when the Sandella team passes it to your prop who's just
coming
having
back.
a rest.
Yeah.
And just,
Who's blatantly.
I mean, in the words of
on
Jeff,
the
in the words of Jeff Tuvey, someone needs to be held accountable for this. There needs to be an investigation for this. That was bizarre. Oh, I think Arona he couldn't believe his luck. Could he?
Unbelievable.
And then he looked at far out to go and went,
It was
having a rest.
That's a fellow Kiwi who passed him the ball as well.
Liam Kay had been designated Wakefield scapegoat season as well with 2 tries. So that's disappointed.
I think that's Chris Chester.
Well, yeah, but he's the obvious scapegoat. Liam Kay's the other scapegoat. Not good enough for the Super League and everything. Got too much hair. Toronto, yeah.
Anybody who wears
Yeah.
a bobble,
So,
clearly not.
I'm not a big fan on man buns myself, personally.
so I did say at the start of the season,
Top
and I
ones,
can't remember if I
top
said it on here or not, that I didn't think we'd win any of the games up until Hull KR. So I was right there. So, hooray. I did tip Hull KR yesterday, though, because I took Leeds, so I don't know what I was doing this weekend. Going to beat Castleford. Castleford are rubbish now. In the Daryl Powell derby, Josh Charnley scored. I think he's gone up on some try chart or something. Toby King.
But again, Cass are now the team that seem to be suffering the most with injuries.
Well, they can put all their academy players in.
I think, as we said,
They started so well.
there was going to be a cycle where every team has to cope with injuries. Ray, we're
Sure
just
not.
waiting for one of them to fall down.
James Roby's about to
Well,
retire.
I think we've just had the premonition there that this is his last season. Again, get your best players out there more often than not. The likelihood is you'll come up with a result.
It also shows the lack of talent below that top 17. I mean,
Yes.
You talked before about the NRL. I mean, you see, I think was he 17, Brad Arthur's son, come and have a great debut for Parramatta.
Stephen Crichton is the example I would use.
He's been around for a while, though, Phil.
But he's still only 90.
Yeah.
And he is so comfortable at that level there. Sam Walker, 18.
Well, Sam Walker, I mean.
Leeds born, Sam Walker.
Yes. So he's allowed to play for England?
He's eligible. Born.
No, but because he was born here, though.
Mm.
Doesn't matter that he's spent all of his life in Australia. And, unlike Jackson Hastings, it's okay. Just
And
check.
Nikolai Ledski's okay, though.
Chris Leeming shouldn't be.
Proper foreign Africa, like well down there. Europe's okay.
I think you colonised that anyways.
Well, where haven't we? Wigan 7 from 7. Brad Singleton, former Leeds man, 2 tries. Liam Farrell, Jackson Hastings against his former club. They love him still in Salford. Get over it, Salford fans. He's gone. He's left you. Now he's leaving Wigan as well.
He's just dropped the goal that's beaten you.
Salford in crisis. I'm sticking with this one.
You think it's going to be a long, hard year for Salford?
I mean, I'm saying this as a team who supports a team that's on exactly the same points percentage of 14.29. Yeah, I am.
I tipped them to be 11th this year. I thought the coach, who's a Salfordian, who did such an excellent job, was the heart and soul of that club, left. Took the conditioner with him.
Because he could see that long term they couldn't match his own ambition.
Yeah, more money, more opportunity.
Better
Club with bigger fan base, better facilities.
And he could pick the players that he wanted, and the club would say, "We'll back you on that."
And he'd taken them to 2 finals, so it's not like he'd done a bad job. But you on top of that, and then a number of players leaving: Niall Evans, Joey Lussick, etc. New coach who hadn't coached in Super League before, no reserves academy. I mean, it's always going to be a lot of churn. Again, It's always going to be a long, hard season. I think the real issue, though, is the AJ Bell. I've not really heard an update on that, but if they lose the tenancy of that stadium, I don't know what happens to the club, where they go.
Well, this is the thing, isn't it? Because it's like Oldham, Swinton,
Sheffield.
Rochdale, all these teams in the Greater Manchester area who
Sheffield
become
right.
I'm sorry. I completely butchered Switch's point.
No, but it's just I didn't want people to think that you thought Sheffield was in the Greater Manchester.
It's all the same to me. But that example, like Sheffield have played, they're playing Doncaster now. They played Wakefield. They played
Barnsley.
Yeah, and they've lost half their fan base. I mean, if Wakefield started playing at Bramall Lane, how many would Wakefield
Well,
get
we
at
were
Bramall
supposed
Lane?
to play in Dewsbury for a bit, which, as we now know, if we'd have gone and played in
Yeah.
Dewsbury, everyone would have thought the Mobile Rocket was the greatest stadium on earth, because that's what everyone thinks about Odsal now. So,
I mean, it's kind of
Oh.
one foot towards death.
Yeah,
You know,
yeah.
you're 1 foot in the grave. So
If
I
you-
really hope that doesn't happen for Salford, and they, you know, for a stadium that was built for the city of Salford with taxpayer money, it shouldn't go to rugby union. But
And again, there are issues going back to what we were talking about earlier about criteria.
that isn't enforced.
That, you know, what is the situation with your stadium? How safe is your tenancy agreement? You know, as well as your academy and your academy status and all that kind of thing. Your production of talent. All of this needs to be.
And
And again, people say, "Oh, you just because you're a fan of licensing," but I just do think that is a
I am a fan of licensing.
criteria by which the sport can move forward.
And you do have to look at then also why we're Salford kicked out of the Willows, but there's other clubs in Super League with dilapidated, terrible grounds.
Absolutely.
And London Broncos, London Broncos were allowed to play in Super League in a stadium that doesn't meet the criteria. So who gets the exemption? Who doesn't? I mean,
But they at least are making plans to go to.
oh yeah, I'm not talking about now.
Which,
I'm
if you were
talking
to
about 2
put
years
an
ago.
elite academy in
Yeah,
Wimbledon,
yeah.
makes some
I think
kind of sense.
I think it's a great move for the Broncos, and hopefully they can build a home. But again, that also goes back to how long has there been a club in London for? How have
Which
we
is
not had a strategy for
ridiculously
London
nomadic.
and, you know, supported them with development officers and other ways, whether it be salary cap concessions, and tried to make that a strong
and as
hub.
we've said, if you even gave dispensation on the salary cap for anybody that they have produced, so that effectively a Louis McCarthy Scarsbrook, to coin an example off the top of my head,
The Dan Sargents
would count
Tony
as
Club.
nil on their salary cap if they wanted to stay.
Yeah. Well, it's essentially that, you know, the London Broncos could be the Melbourne Storm of
Absolutely.
Super League, but that hasn't happened. And we have to look at
Wait
why.
until Toulouse get promoted and see the backlash.
We didn't talk about Huddersfield when we talked about League. 44-6. Impressive.
We said at the beginning when you were fanning about the cameras.
Well, I mean, I only saw the highlights,
The-
but they
the-
look slick. They look
the-
very
the-
slick.
Oh yeah, you were talking about the process, yeah.
But the process seems to be right. And I think his view of how the game should be played is, if I was a Huddersfield fan, I'd be excited about what might be the future under Ian Watson. I said they might play off this year. I think they still, might.
I thought they'd be in the top five. I know they had a poor start. I think it was always going to take
It's
time
a long season.
with a new coach and a lot of new players, and obviously Aidan Caesar was out for the 3.
And the great thing is, you're looking at a club there who have invested in their academy to the point where they are now bringing players into their first team who are holding their own in the first team. They're there on merit. They're nailing down. They don't need to go out and sign a centre when Jay Wardle is playing as well as he is.
But on that as well, and this ties back into the academy game. If you're, I can't remember his name now, but the young Huddersfield centre winger who went
Darnell McIntyre.
Dom Young.
Yeah, Dom Young.
And Bailey Hodgson from Castleford. You can't get a chance to play in Super League, but you'll go and play in the New South Wales Cup or get signed up by an NRL club and
absolutely
get more money and the opportunity. So we may see a lot more of that.
Yep. So
whether that's a good thing for the England team at the end. Yeah.
The worry then becomes you're losing your box office players at the top who are overseas. You're losing your most talented juniors at the bottom. What are you left with in the middle?
Because I think the whole John Bateman, George Williams experience now, particularly with Canberra, less so Sam Tompkins, but there's been some other ones. I don't think you're going to get NRLs who are going to pay big money transfer fees for players who get homesicks, and I'm not having a go on them for getting homesick. Completely understandable. But if you can put 50 grand as opposed to putting 400 grand on someone who's got
Dom
potential.
Young's already played first grade for Newcastle, and that must be an accelerated development.
Well, they've had a terrible injury list in their back line, and I think Bailey Hodgson's been injured. He might have made his debut, by now. So, I think the NRL clubs will be looking, and already have been looking at the best young talent. And instead of waiting until they're 25 and they've played for England, costs a
Well,
lot of
some of
money.
our best young talent that we haven't even heard of yet is getting Australian agents.
Well, Herbie Farnworth,
Well,
what was he, 15?
He
Gareth Widdop was about 15, wasn't he?
Well, the thing about Herbie Farnworth is really interesting because his
Uncle
didn't even want him in a system over here. He just
was
felt
a Wigan talent scout.
yeah, he felt that if he needed to go abroad and see if he was good enough to play at that level, he could always come back and play over here.
They are the best talent systems in rugby league. That's a fact. Much like the English football academies are much better than the Australian soccer academy. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
We just need to admit that. Doesn't mean that there can't be good academies in England.
Strengths,
but
absolutely.
Yeah.
We'll probably have Wigan fans say we need to talk enough about Wigan, but they're boring now because they're winning all the time. And
the interesting thing about Wigan is they're doing things very Wigan. That they're winning on a week-to-week basis, and their coaches come out and go, "We're not playing very well, but I'm happy that we've won." And yet, the big games that they needed to win, like the Challenge Cup game against Hull and the Grand Final last year, the Challenge Cup semi-final last year, they haven't won. So there's a little hurdle that they need to get over.
I think that's a little bit nonsense, really. No offense to you, Phil, but the grand final.
But they didn't.
The ball hits the post.
Yeah.
But margins in a big game like that. I don't think they have
They didn't play well against Hull in the quarterfinal.
They didn't. No, that was by their standards.
They did,
but they did play well in the grand final.
They didn't play well against Leeds in the semi-final of the Challenge Cup last year. The big games that they've had.
I don't really remember that game, to be honest. But yeah,
it was the game that Leeds. It was the game last year that Leeds played really well. Never allowed Wigan to be.
I just think when you come to those games, I mean, putting the Hull one aside, and I think Hull are a much, much better team this year than they were last year. And I think anyone who's watched Hull a few times this year would say that. I mean, I think they probably should have beaten Wigan in the league if Jake Connor kind of kept his head.
Stayed on the field.
Yes, yeah. And that can cost you a game, a brain explosion.
Interesting thing for me with Wigan, I think, again, we said it a couple of weeks ago, is where is Zach Hardaker's best position? And I think it's fullback. And if that is his best position, and that's the position he clearly wants to play in, then he's wasted on the wing at the moment.
If it was me, I would have Bevan French at fullback and Zach Harder in the centre, because I think if you've got a quality players, you find a way to play them all. And I think that worked for them last year. I mean, there's not much point having Bevan French in your team. I mean, he's a decent winger, but I think he is a fullback.
I just think Hardaker is so much more dangerous when he's reading the game at the back, and defensively he's arguably the best fullback that we've got. He's a better
defender.
I just think
than
he's wasted on the wing and frustrated when he plays in the centre. Again, you look at perhaps long term as well and say, Bevan French is the kind of guy that you give the roving commission to play anywhere along the back line. But
if you put him in the wing, he won't see the ball half as much.
Well,
you put him at fullback, he can come into the line when he chooses.
I just think Hardaker should be their first choice. And that may well find them out.
He's not going to be England's first choice fullback, though, is he?
There you are, we're talking about it.
Yeah.
We disagree.
Yeah.
Wigan fans will no doubt disagree with.
Yeah.
Will Adrian Lamb be there next year?
Well, again, that we talk about coaches and who's the pressure, but you're going to have to. What Huddersfield have done with Ian Watson, which I basically think is you're here for as long as you want to be here, we'll back you whatever you need it. You need to deliver. You're under pressure to deliver because we're not going to put all this money in if we're not seeing improvement, which they clearly are. I think we're going to need to do that with their coach, whoever it is. A 1 year rolling contract, and the uncertainty at some points in the year as to is he going to be here? Who do they sign? Who makes the decision? Who am I going to be playing for if I come to your club? I just think that's unsettling. And if Adrian Lamb is the man and they do want him here long term, I think they need to pitch him an offer. But
does he want to be here long term? Well, that's the other thing. I mean, he's not saying, he's got a wife and 2 sons back in Australia.
And I suspect he'd rather be watching wouldn't rather be. I think he'd like to be watching his son playing for the Roosters.
Playing very well for the Roosters, yeah.
But he needs a job as well. So, but I'm sure negotiations are ongoing. But as a major club, I think it's like when Justin Holbrook was at St Helens. It was like, you're here for as long as you want to be here. If you're going back to the NRL, we can't put anything offer on the table that's going to stop you. I think it'd be the same with Christian Wolf. He may at some point go back, but I think they bought him on the basis of the fact that you're not just here for a year. Wigan just seem to have a situation with their coach that is always going to
Well, it goes back
crop
to
up.
Sean Edwards was supposed to be the coach, wasn't he? Obviously, it didn't happen, and Adrian Lamb was the fullback, and he's been a very good fullback. I think he's done they're the only undefeated team in Super League, aren't they? Yeah.
Would Adrian Lamb get an NRL coaching job? Asks JWell TV on the YouTube.
I think he's in the mix. Yeah, I think
he'd get an assistant's job for sure.
He's already had
a head coach.
He's already had.
I think if he went back, he'd go back as an assistant, maybe. But
I think that was the idea to come to England, because much like Justin Holbrook, Trent Robinson, Michael Maguire, if you have success in Super League and you prove yourself, it's a greater step than just assistant to the NRL. And Brett Hodgson is another one. In 3 years, are we going to see him in the NRL, or 5 years?
Yeah,
I would say
he'll be coach of
probably.
West.
Yeah. Or Parramatta. Yeah. I think it was interesting earlier. I think there was 5 coaches sacked or moved on in the NRL last year. Obviously, we've not seen any. Well, we've seen one club bloodletting with John Morris, but
that went well.
Yeah, well, it may. I think John Morris got treated pretty harshly, personally. But Craig Fitzgibbon may turn out to be the next Craig Bellamy. We don't know, so it's a wait and see. But no, I think Adrian Lamb would certainly be in the discussions. I mean, if you look at his win rate, big games or not, he has done quite well. They won the League Shield last year.
That there's going to be a 17th franchise, so there's going to be room for an
Brisbane
extra coach.
Well, I think Wayne Bennett said to all 3 Queensland bidders that he'll be their coach. So he's hedged his bets.
All right, so there's a vacancy at South then.
No, Jason Dimitri's got
but there is going to be more opportunities.
Yeah, someone will get sacked probably. I mean, Adam O'Brien's not doing too well.
That's a
Trent Barrett's not doing too well.
That's
Anthony
not as big as a
Griffith's
surprise.
up and down.
You like him, don't you?
Anthony Griffith. I don't know, but don't really have. He's an old school coach. He's actually done quite well. I mean, they didn't start the season
Brisbane
well,
might need a coach.
They did win. They did win on the weekend. Is that one win, Phil? Or
no, I thought it's a 3.
Yeah. They played well at Magic. Only got beat by 50 by Manly. Yeah,
I don't think they're going to win the premiership this year.
I saw a tweet that said you're 2 wins off the top 8 or something. Can they make it?
It's a very lopsided competition when you've got Penrith who are undefeated and
about the NRL.
Yeah,
I just saw the tweet. Catalans beat St Helens. Saints are rubbish now. Just backing up Kev, who watches this programme, and his opinion on that.
Do you think Catalan are the real deal?
Don't we say this every time at this time of the year?
Yeah, I can't work them out. I thought at the start of the year they'd struggle because looking at the players they recruited and the numbers that they'd left, obviously Israel Folau wasn't coming back.
And Dean Farr is a better player.
He's not a better player, but he's a very good player. He is a very good player, and I think he's been wasted. Man. Yeah, he's a different sort of player. But also they had the training issue, so they literally, I think, worse than anyone else because the rules in France, they couldn't train as a team. But they started the season really well. But then they've, the Challenge Cup game against Warrington.
But they had a massive week this week, beating Holloway on Monday, and Saints at home on Saturday, and they've got Wigan coming to them this week. I reckon this is the part of the season where we'll know whether they are genuine challengers or not. I think Tom Davis is one of the best wingers in Super League.
He's having a great season, yeah.
And I did we say it last week? I think he's going to finish as the top try scorer this year.
So if you're Leeds Rhinos, isn't he someone you look at and say, oh...
They have looked at him. They looked at him before he signed
exclusive.
For Catalan.
There you go.
I believe he is a Leeds fan.
Wow. And he's a Wiganer.
But whether they would prize him away from the Dragons, he is the winger I think that Leeds need. I thought it was really, understandably, Wigan have a load of very good wingers, and somebody was always going to drop off that tree, and he was injured. But he always looked to me like he had everything. But I just think Maloney's given them a bit more solidity in the middle, and the forwards seem to be, well, they'll either have a day where they'll give away a load of penalties, or they'll be really, really disciplined. When they're disciplined, they're so hard to break down.
It's
this week, they have been excellent.
That consistency just, I don't think you can.
I'm not saying they are the real deal.
Pick them week by week with any certainty, but on their day, they're a very, very good team.
They seem to be more consistent this year.
Some seem to be able to watch us okay this week. Some are having trouble. So I don't know what the issue is, but a couple of questions on the championship, because we've done Super League, haven't we? Apart from asking why people don't like Richard Agard, I might save that until next week, just in case Leeds lose again. Who have they got this week? Cass. Oh,
Cass on Wednesday, Friday night.
Oh, it's not on telly. That's a shame.
No, it's not.
Saints and Hull instead. Andrew says, what are your thoughts on Toulouse going to Super League? I know it's early on in the season, but they look phenomenal. They've gone 6 from 6, can't say that. They beat Swinton 66-18.
At Swinton.
At
even though it was a home game.
At Haywood Road, the home of Sale. What do you think of the championship? It's a division of rugby league teams. Why have London been so up and down? They lost 33-8 yesterday to the brave Bradford Bulls.
My only thought about Toulouse is I think they possibly will win promotion, but Super League have got to announce now that they are happy for them to come into the We cannot afford to go through the whole Toronto scenario again.
Well, you do remember before the year that Toronto were promoted, that Ralph Rimmer said publicly they're not guaranteed even if they win.
Have you still got Ken Davies' number from that briefing? Just ring him up, ask him.
Because I do think we need to get stuff like that, apportioned before we get to the point of no return.
It wouldn't be very rugby league, Phil, would it? Come on.
And again, I just think there are some advantages of having two teams in the same country playing in Super League.
No. Toulouse the top, you're not coming in, you're French. Feathers in the second, you're too small. Bradford the third, perfect.
We own your lease.
Perfect.
I can't speak about the quality in the championship because I don't see enough of it, and I think if you're only dealing on highlights, then it's disingenuous to say what you think the standard of play is. I do think the issues that the championship have had for the last few years manifest themselves. If everybody gets a different disbursement, you are going to have an on-level playing field, and it's the same on-level playing field that we've always had. It's a really difficult division because it's that mixture of part-time and full-time, and yes, Bradford, who part full-time but part-time, have beaten London, who are part full-time but I don't know. But I think the issue is that we need to decide what we want to be in that division.
Jason Robinson, I assume not that one, says he'd love to see a French derby in Super League. About the stuff I say about Sale, it's not going to help Jason Robinson. And Sheila says Toulouse will be good for the game. Featherston 50 points to 18 winners away at Sheffield. Brackets Doncaster yesterday. Halifax beating Newcastle 32-0 on the road. Widnes 44, Whitehaven 6, and York 34, Oldham 6 in front of 1,000 people in the new exciting LNER Community Stadium, Bijou Boutique Stadium, which we'll talk about in a minute.
Which is great if you can find where to park.
There's a whole retail park around the park.
Yeah, but you can only stay for 2 hours, which if you're there for a double header is a little bit difficult.
Unless you know it runs to car parking.
Yeah,
unless you talk nicely to
I didn't have that problem when I went to February and we're in a national lockdown. So,
in League One, London Scholars won away at Coventry 44-26. Doncaster beat West Wales 62-24. Barrow won at Hunslet 29-6.
That's a big result for Barrow.
Wakefield won at North Wales 44-16. To a bad week for Wales this week. And Abigail, who was watching but probably isn't now, we've lost the link. So apologies, Abigail, because you won't hear your shout out. She'll be happy because Rochdale Hornets beat Keighley Cougars 43-36. Fui Moi Moi, who is still a thing, scored a try at the age of 433. So well
she
done.
Can hear it on the podcast.
That's
Hello,
true.
Abigail.
So well done, Fui Moi Moi. Well done, the Rochdale Hornets. Massively high scoring game. So you almost seen it. Basketball there. So Workington top of League One, just above Barrow, who are not from Cumbria, because people will tell us off who we say they are. 3 wins from 3 from both. Toulouse and Fez both top of the Championship. 6 wins from 6. This week, in the Championship, Toulouse versus Newcastle. This on Saturday. And West Wales versus London Skulls in League One on Sunday. Not all games on our league now. Is that now a thing? Or
there will be some, but I don't know if they're showing all.
Well, no, because Batley Swinton's not on.
Because it affects the crowd, you see.
And Sheffield Whitehaven's not on. But on is Bradford York, Halifax Fev, London Dewsbury and Oldham Widnes. And in League One, not on, apparently, Barrow North Wales, Coventry, Rochdale, Keighley Huns and Workington Doncaster. I'm saying they're not on. It's what it says in the paper, so I could be wrong. Gaslight says, before we get on to the semi-finals of the women's thing, do you think Steve Price will get a job in the NRL when he goes back to Oz? You'd hope he'd get a job.
Well, yeah.
What's he going to do?
I don't think he'll fall straight into a head coaching role. I imagine he'll pick up a coaching role somewhere. But yeah, I mean, it depends really how they see. I mean, Warrington win the grand final, his reputation won't be harmed. But yeah, I don't think he's not got a job lined up to go to, as far as I know. I think he was one who, obviously, with a young family, after 4 years, wanted to go back, and Warrington probably thought it was time for a change as well. So, yeah.
Well, Canterbury Bulldogs are rubbish, aren't they? CG says, surely Toulouse should be playing more French players. I think there was 8 overseas players playing for them this week. Yeah, but I bet there's a lot of overseas players playing for most teams in the Championship. And that's where it all falls apart, isn't it? Because if we talk about, when we go back to the academy system, how many third-rate Aussies are playing in the Championship? Yeah, exactly.
Wigan and...
Both Wakefield's halfbacks are foreign. Surely,
you don't like foreigners, do you, Rich?
Not in Wakefield. Oh, no.
New Brown at Featherstone.
Oh.
New Brown, is he?
Dane Chisholm. Aren't
they from Pontefract?
Ponte Carlo.
Pontefract Dubbo.
I think I said this a while ago. I think there should be
I don't think any overseas players should play in the Championship. Well, and again, if we're serious about standards and academies and bringing young talent through, then I think
there should be a reduction of at least one quota spot, because you have the Colpack ruling where people who are Australian or New Zealanders who can used
to be able to. I'm not sure.
Well, it is changing, but yeah. I mean, it's a bit of a technicality that means you can have more foreigners, and it does harm the development of local players. So,
but again, you're into we keep going back to the debate about academies because people want to talk about it. Where does dual registration fit into the academy system? Where does the loans fit into the academy system? Where does the concept of pairing up clubs at different levels? Which I hate to use the term feeder club because it's a pejorative term. People think, oh, we're lesser. No, actually, it's a development pathway. How does that all fit into the academy debate?
Well, it's interesting. I think you talked earlier about like Michael Lewis, who has played some Super League, but is probably not ready to play weekend. He's gone to York. So effectively, that is their reserve team.
Yeah,
it's helping York out because they've had injuries in their halves.
Yeah.
But where else, if he doesn't go there, where else
does he go? Does it need to be a formal link to academies?
Yeah. But is there enough? Is there enough players, good enough players to form a reserve team while also still having a championship and a League One?
Well,
I don't think there is.
That is the other thing about talking about going back to something. Why did it stop in the first place? Because there wasn't enough talent coming through. So just going back to something is not necessarily the answer. I think there is an issue
have less money.
in the community game. I think there is an issue that we've taken some of the representative steps out. So there aren't town team games anymore, and there aren't. So the ability at the age of 11 maybe to play for the city of Wigan in a big derby against the city of St Helens, that's not necessarily about you're going to play at Super League in some day. That's putting in graduated steps so that you can represent at some age the area you're from. And we've ditched all of that. Well, can we bring that back along with elite academies? Or the whole thing needs to be looked at and not just a small part of it.
So we've got the excitement, because I think that's everything done from the men's game, I think.
You're in charge.
Yeah.
You and the good people who are.
Yeah, I mean, it's good to have them back, isn't it? And, again, apologies, but
You couldn't expect us to be at peak form in week 1 after such a long way.
I might have to get some new phone chargers that actually work, or just actually get some things that work. So is there actually any other news that we need to talk about? I don't think there is there? I don't think anything's actually
Disciplinaries come out. There's not a lot. A couple of players have got a match each.
I know some people will be upset that
Corbin Sims.
Yeah, he's going to be
Exonerated.
sent off. Yeah, it's going to happen, isn't it? But that's not a bad thing.
Well,
because as we say,
are we going to see or is
As
that
long
the
as there's
first? Is that the first crackdown on high shots in Super League? Because we've not seen it before.
No.
Are we going to see it now? I mean, there's not been an edict from head office, or that I'm aware of. There may have been, but should we have a crackdown?
Yes. Because duty of care is
game's gone soft.
number 1.
Bring back the biff.
I'd love to see some of not the ex-players. I can understand why they would say it's gone soft, and that I can understand that. But the posers on the sidelines who say that kind of thing, I think, I'd love to see you get your heads caved in and see what you think about it.
Well, I think if anyone reads the brilliant interview that Donald McRae did with Rob Burrow,
absolutely,
and I think was it 30 concussions he suffered in his career, and I think there was some. I've written it down. There was some stats that were circulated in the media, not in that interview, but around the same time. No, I don't seem to find it, but I think it was Peter V'landys who said, it's fine to win at all costs, but not at the cost of a player's welfare.
Absolutely.
And
the other thing as well that needs to be recognised is the game went fully professional around about the start of Super League. We are now 25 years into that. The medical research is saying that because the impact of being fully professional is having a much greater loading on collision, we need to respond to that.
And the more times more times you get hit in the head and concussed, you are more likely to get dementia and MND.
And I also think that when we look back at some of our favourite players from a different era, they are suffering now in their older age.
Many of them are,
from repeated blows to the head. And yes, the game was different, the rules were different, the acceptance in society was different. Now that we know some of that impact, we have to be seen to be doing something. So some people get sent off and are proved to be not guilty, but they're deemed at the time of collision that they'd hit the head.
There's also the question or the talk about whether tackle technique has changed because of the wrestle, and that people now hit on the ball and higher as opposed to at the waist or below the ball or the legs, and that seems to be so. Obviously, your chances of slipping up are a lot greater.
Absolutely.
So whether we need to go back to,
well, I think that's the thing that both Trent Robinson and Wayne Bennett talked about. That yes, there's a crackdown, and it's meaning that some games have got blowout scores because players are being sin-binned where earlier in the season they weren't. But if it proves that over time their technique improves, it's got to be a good thing. And Victor Radley will have to learn to tackle lower.
His father's from Sheffield, so we'll blame that anyway. But there is, I mean, if you look at rugby union, there was obviously a lot of concern when they started theirs, but it does seem to be pretty much accepted now. Wasn't my choice, so please don't blame me, but I was at a Welsh person's house, and I was watching the European Cup final on Saturday, and a player got red carded because he went to make a tackle and his shoulder connected the head of an opponent, and play went on. He got red carded, but the game went on, and it was quite an absorbing contest. It will be accepted. Players will learn. They will modify.
They have to.
Yeah.
And there will be occasions where someone slips into a tackle and inadvertently their head will be hit, but you have to protect the head.
It's tough. It's like when they know not to go in for the knee, but going for the knee. They know not to do it. They still do it. They know not to abuse people on the pitch, but they still do it. Jason's asked, does tackling low cause just as many concussions? I don't know. You'd assume not, because you're not targeting the head. But obviously there's going to be
the tackle, the person doing the tackle. Floor, I think that comes down to the technique of where you place. But I think tackling styles have changed over the last 20 20 years or so,
and
15
whiplash
years.
is a huge issue as well, because again, the force of the tackle is greater than it's ever been before, and all of that needs protecting as best you can.
Is or can be a dangerous sport. We were
It
both
is.
there. Innocuous moment which is left.
Hmm.
Someone, I don't know how much he is at the minute, but he's obviously not what he was 14 months ago.
Mm.
That Rob Burrow interview, apart from being brilliant, because Donald McRae did it, again, there isn't evidence that says loads of blows to the head have contributed to my condition, but his wife, who has dealt with physiotherapy all her life and may not yet be an empirical study in itself, is saying she thinks it's a contributory factor. Well, we can't ignore that.
If you're a young mother reading that story now, and your 6-year-old son wants to play rugby league
or football, he's got the choice.
Yeah, well, as long as he's not hitting the ball, yeah. But what what impact does that have?
Which again is the Volandes rationale.
It's right. We need the next generation to come through. Otherwise,
Absolutely.
we don't have participation. We do not have a sport at all,
Absolutely.
let alone academies.
Absolutely, 100%.
So we have to make the sport as safe as possible. It isn't a safe sport. Anyone who's played it,
Like you did this weekend.
no, playing touch is a lot safer. But
You couldn't get up the stairs.
no, that's a different story. But it is a elite sport.
Absolutely.
That's why the people who play it at the highest level deserve the praise and the accolades, because
Absolutely,
it's huge
100%.
bravery.
And I think
Not everyone can do it.
we'll get on to the women's game as well, but to play this sport at an elite level, be it men, women, young kids, you have to be an incredible athlete now. Not everybody is going to come through because it's so demanding. It's not jumpers for
I think it's
goalposts.
just not the athleticism; it's the mental
Absolutely.
strength and the mental toughness.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? You usually up, kept playing. It's all, and it's all the other players are exactly the same. It's almost madness.
Sometimes we need to take those decisions out of the hands of those that have incredible mental toughness and say, for your benefit, stand down for a little bit.
I think James Graham is the perfect example, who was kind of, it's my body, it's my brain.
Yeah.
But then researched the topic and came around to an understanding that yes, things need to be, and some people probably need to be protected from themselves.
Yes, absolutely.
We're in trouble, Phil, because your dad's phone to complain that it's not been working.
I see.
Yeah. So this is the biggest scandal in broadcasting since the BBC thing last week, I think. It's working. Well, we're moving there. I can see us. The women's Challenge Cup semi-finals were on the BBC Red Button, but rather than go and listen to Mark Wilson, we went to York. We were there at the boutique York City Knights home, the LNER Community Stadium. Very nice.
Brilliant.
Pretty seats and everything. Plenty of room, plenty of leg room. Not enough plug sockets. Probably do a few more of them before the World Cup. Get some in, John, if you're watching. Had a comment on Twitter on Saturday, I think it was, saying the Leeds players look tanned. I think I'm concerned.
The yellow shirt.
It's the yellow shirts. I think there's some kind
Maybe
of
they've been to Ollie Parmington's.
Yeah,
so long.
nuclear yellow. I'd noticed it the week before because when Leeds were playing at Wakefield, some of their players look very orange. I'm not going to name them because they might be watching, but some of them look very orange and they're not orange.
Two wonderful games.
Yeah, let's talk about York first. You've got to be brave as a coach to put a player in at fullback who's not usually a fullback. And that's what they did with Kelsey Gentles. They put her in at fullback, and York went on to beat Castle for 32-4, which I guess was not much of a surprise, was it, in terms of the scoreline? I was a bit disappointed with the game because I thought, I'm trying to put this the right way. I thought Castleford would have upset them a bit more. I thought they would have been a bit more physical with them. But I guess
carried a sense of angst.
Yeah, but they were too professional. I didn't try to wind them up. I'd have wound them up.
Are they the Newcastleford? How have they managed to poach What's going on there, Rich?
5 players.
And the coach.
And the coach, yeah.
And 2 from Bradford, one of whom was the player of the match.
Is that a monetary investment, or is that just smart recruitment?
Was it the conditioner or whatever he is? I don't know. Someone else on the coaching staff.
I think that has been an inducement, an expenses covering inducement. Nothing illegal.
No. I'm not.
Perfectly
not,
within the realms of the rules of a competition where
more of a
paid.
kind of
It's
Silvertail, Spybro style.
I think it's
Andrew says here, health insurance and expenses.
I think it's more to do
Well,
with
we all know
ambition, isn't it?
Yeah.
That the York club want to
fair play then.
build and move forward. There is an argument as to whether that should be done out of season rather than in season, that there isn't really a transfer policy. So Castleford have been left without 5 of their best players and have no recompense. And I think that is a valid question to be asked. I just thought the skill levels were superb of the York players. And the one thing you have to say is you can bring a lot of players in, but as Ian Watson has been saying, it does take a little bit of time to gel them into a unit.
Yeah.
And they have done that virtually overnight, which is a full credit to the women themselves and the coaching staff. They looked a really, really good outfit. They got the ball to their most damaging players most often, and they were a joy to watch.
Castle will rebuild because they've got still some very good players there. You've got the Woman of Steel from 3 years ago.
Olivia Ford?
Yes, because you kept asking me. Olivia Wood. Close.
Olivia Wood.
Close.
Sounded like Ford, but it was Wood. Absolutely outstanding.
Never stopped working, did you?
Would not have got a nomination for Player of the Match, but every team needs somebody who is just going to take the dirty carries and keep going up and making the tackles against bigger people. And she was, for me, absolutely outstanding and epitomised the best of the women's game. Olivia Wood, sorry for getting your name wrong first time. I thought you were brilliant.
I don't think Marsha was playing 13, was she? But she's a proper. She's Andy Farrell. She's Andy Farrell now. When Andy Farrell decided, well, actually, I'm going to be stand off now. I'm not going to be able to sort name. I'm going to be stand off in that era in the early 2000s. So York in the final.
Peach as well.
Yes,
absolutely controlled the game.
They've got the right players in the right positions, haven't they? From Castleford there. It's interesting that I guess the interesting thing now is when you look at it is, yes, they took the players they did. Why did they not take the other players? They didn't. I don't know. So you try to work that one out yourself. But Castleford will come back because they'll rebuild somehow. So they're in the final. They're the big underdog story. It's a strange underdog story, isn't it? Because to the outside world, it's massive underdogs. York. They've come from nowhere. They were bottom of the league last year with Wakefield and this now. But inside the game, it's not quite the same because obviously they've taken these players from Castleford, and some people aren't as she's a great story as the outside world is. But that's fine because we can talk about it in different terms than the outside world. The second semi-finals was the one we were looking forward to because this was the great fixture of 2019. Twice on that occasion in the Challenge Cup and the playoffs, Leeds nicked it at the death. But this was a bad weekend for Leeds. Men, women, PDRL, I think, all lost. Everyone out. 20 points to 12. I think since... I don't know if that scoreline... I don't say flatters Leeds. That's not what I mean, but I think Saints were better than that scoreline.
It didn't reflect St Helens' dominance.
They were really good.
There were 2 teams who, again, were very, very evenly matched, and so you need an edge. And the edge that St Helens clearly had and have had for a year and a half and have tried through the closing was they needed the chance for redemption. And it was that extra element that said, we are going to do whatever it takes to not lose again to this opposition. You could tell when Courtney Winfield's Hill conversion to Leeds' late try hit the post that it was almost a big sigh of relief from St Helens, because had that gone over and it had been 2014 with 3 minutes to go, you could almost see people thinking it's going to happen against keeping Courtney Winfield Hill under complete control. I think that they had, again, a couple of players who, when they were given a half chance, their centre combination was absolutely outstanding. But the work that they did in the middle to shut Leeds down, they got their deserved reward. And you could tell what it meant to them at the end, because they reacted as though the biggest weight had been lifted off their shoulders.
They did to Leeds in terms of defence what I've seen Leeds do to teams already this season. It was a really great defensive performance from St Helens. Interesting how Leeds bounce back from this one, because obviously this is their first real big defeat. I think you can write off that defeat to Wigan in the Championship grand final a couple of years ago, because the weather was awful. And
I don't think Super League was as established then as it is now.
We were the only people there, you and Pete Smith, I think. Not that I mean you were the only people there on Saturday. But yeah, I don't think that was that in stream, that game?
Yes.
At least it was on the BBC.
It was just a great game.
Yeah.
I think there were two very, very contrasting games. One was very open, and the other was just incredibly intense. But the standard of the women's game is not only on the rise if those two semi-finals are the judge, but we started this long rambling conversation many moons ago about profile. And in the lead up to these two semi-finals, there was a page in the Daily Telegraph about
Ashley Howard.
We're very big on women's sport.
Yeah.
But it was about Ashley being 7 weeks after giving birth, was playing in this game. Well, name me a men's story that's going to get a page in the Daily Telegraph at the moment.
Okay.
Probably something negative.
But there isn't going to be one. So I get people who say, oh, why do you spend so much time talking about the women's game? The potential that the women's game has got
needs to be supported.
is
100%.
something that we should be putting as much resource behind as we can. And that when we talk about elite academies, we need to bring them in for women and girls as well.
Andrew says, York might have brought in 7 players, but there's 17 players in the team, plus others in the squad. They've got some good talent already in the team. The 7 haven't just won it on their own. No, they certainly haven't.
Absolutely not.
But it also helped.
But it's elevated the level that they're playing at.
Yeah.
And the others that were there are responding to having better players in the squad, demanding more of them. So it clearly has an impact. But no, it's not about just the ones that...
It is interesting, though, that York as a club is investing in its women's team. I mean, it has invested in its men's team, but probably a lot of clubs would take that money and go, well, we'll just put more of that into the men's team. But
and as John Flatman said when he was on here, they recognised that they'd neglected the women's team, and that now they've found some resource to put into it, they're going to make best use of it.
And if they make even more signings, which they may well do in the future.
I think they may well do in the future. They may even not come from traditional rugby league areas.
Like Newcastle.
All the McCallum. Daughter of
Oh,
Seamus.
did we find that out?
Yes. But from Whitley Bay, I think.
Whitley Bay.
But isn't that a great story that we haven't told?
Yeah.
That the guy who played in the Challenge Cup final, his daughter is now playing in the semi-final of the Challenge Cup final.
I'm still getting over the fact that Danica's got to win. It's just.
You can tell.
St Helens are in the final. If you're not watching the interview with Birmingham, you have to, because you will be completely full of enthusiasm afterwards for the final in a couple of weeks' time, which is on BBC Two, on actual television. Just think, as we said a couple of weeks ago, it was just on the BBC Sport website 3 years ago, and now it's on actual television. So that's that. This week in the Betfred Women's Super League, I'm not going to a game, so I don't know if you can, but please go. Huddersfield, Wigan, Wakefield, Featherstone, Warrington, Bradford, York, Castleford. Don't know when any of these games have been played. Could be anywhere.
Oh, York Castleford repeat game.
Oh, yeah.
Ooh.
Could be absolutely anywhere.
Hope that's on our league.
So Warrington, Bradford will be
Twitch.
interesting, of course, because Bradford having lost to Huddersfield the other week. Warrington are looking for their first one, aren't they? Still in the competition, so. And Wakefield Feather will be good as well. Come on, Wakefield. Better win.
Bragging rights.
Yeah. I think we're done, aren't we? I think.
Any other questions on...
No. I mean, hopefully next week things work better. But
We had the wall all done, chipped, polished, hoovered, but we couldn't get the technology.
no, but it's still better than Zoom.
It is. It's just good to be back. It's good to have interaction while we're there, and it's great to be in a room together.
Yeah. It's like
I'll have to
the
ring my dad. Well,
Yeah.
You upset?
Yeah, I'm going to get told off your wife as well now. What's he called? He's on the thing at the start of the programme.
Robert Elston.
Robert Elton, yeah. And he took data, don't know, because he's on that. But for the last year, we've been stuck in, so I can't really put any new people on it. Just be Zooms. But we're not going to do the predictions because we can't be bothered. We'll wait till Scott gets back.
I'm still not sure there's a form line in Super League anyway at the moment.
No.
Wigan.
Wigan by 10.
But we're going to have Catalan this weekend. Who would you confidently predict would win that?
Yeah, that's a good point. I'd still edge towards Wigan, but not with a lot of yeah. Apparently, I've got
You're
Wigan.
Wigan.
Yeah, apparently I've got Wigan bias. So add to my other biases. There's a lot
So
of there's a lot
is
of
it just
biases
the whole
to
of
fit in.
like the Wigan borough?
I think there's Hull,
And
Hull
Hull.
FC, Leeds.
Are you anti-Leeds?
Apparently,
All right.
Toronto, obviously. Okay,
Ottawa.
yeah. Catalans.
Where's Eric
yeah.
Perez these days? I've not heard from him for a while. He's still about?
I don't know what's happening with the NARL.
I'd like to help. I think they've issued some domestic season fixtures in the East due to start in June.
I mean, this programme fully is behind Jacksonville just picking up a trophy and claiming it as their own. We're fully behind that. And
Not
What
playing.
about the Las Vegas Strippers?
the what?
I mean, whatever they're called.
But aren't they not now playing?
should be
because they're
called
in the
strippers.
West.
I don't know. That's what they should be called.
And on that bombshell.
Is
It's an
that,
opportunity,
is that the
missed,
male or the female team? Just do
Well,
not answer that.
oh.
Do not answer it.
Haven't you seen the Thunder from down there?
We've done all this great work
Juveniles.
for Women's Rugby League. And there you go, straight in. It's all gone into the bin. Again. We'll be back next week. I don't know. Is anyone joining us next week? I don't know.
I normally do as I'm told.
Yeah, I don't know.
Leave it all to you.
I don't know. We'll see. We'll see who turns up next week.
I think my dad's on.
Yeah. We'll see who we can get to come to Leeds and talk about Rugby League. I'll have to do that because I just have to do this here. So we'll see. Thanks for putting up with us, and we'll see you. We'll see you next week. Adios. Bye bye. End. It says not yet. No end. Bye.